having their 35th homecoming Saturday, March 14th and March 5th. We regret to announce that Karen Clayton, who was scheduled to speak this morning, is quite ill and is in an Alabama hospital. They aren't sure if it's the flu or malaria, but they think that it is not malaria. Her son and daughter-in-law are caring for her. And Sister Darla Dill from Cleburne is going to read her manuscript for us this morning. Darla is from the Central Congregation in Cleburne, and she teaches the ladies' Bible class there, and we are most happy to have Darla at this time. And she's a good friend of my daughter's, too.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm not used to being wired for sound. I understand that I have 38 minutes to speak, and I have a 55-minute lesson that Karen has prepared. So we may go very fast. I'm sorry that Karen couldn't be with you today. They have been working in India for 19 years. They love the Indian people. They have a heart for India. And I think you will understand as we talk about the darkness of Hinduism, how much that we need to dispel that darkness, not only in India, but here in the United States as well. Hinduism is a tremendously complex religion. The darkness of Hinduism does truly loom over the country of India, a land of nearly 1 billion souls. 75% of these are in the clutches of Hinduism. Hinduism is believed to be the oldest religion in the world today, dating back some 5,000 years. It is believed by most Hindus that Hinduism itself has no beginning and no end. They believe that Hinduism is a continuous process preceding the existence of our earth and the many worlds beyond. Actually, it is believed by some Hindus that Hinduism is in fact not a religion at all, but rather a means of presenting a culture, a way of life, which is indigenous to the country of India. To define Hinduism is to relate it to a geographic region around the river Sindhu, and they believe that this was a corruption of the word Sindhu to call it Hinduism. The greatest qualities of Hinduism are open-mindedness, tolerance, impartiality, and free thinking. Hinduism is a religion which supposedly accepts everyone in its fellowship. That is, they are tolerant of people coming into their religion, but not necessarily tolerant of other people's religions and their fellowship. They like people to join their fellowship. But it has been very obvious from the reports in the villages that Hindus do not appreciate Christians teaching Christianity. Hinduism totally permeates the life of every Hindu from time of birth. This is a unique feature of the religion as it permits the greatest freedom of worship and insists that each person must be guided by his or her own individual spiritual experience. It does not accept dictatorship and religious guidance. There are Hindus who believe that Hinduism is just a philosophy and do not believe in any God or in salvation. Hinduism is known for an evolving religion. Hindus readily absorb the religion of other people, and it is constantly in change as they bring in perhaps Judaism and the belief of a priest and a tribe or sect, and in Christianity, the belief of a blood sacrifice. And the Hindus often have a dot on their forehead, a red dot, which symbolizes blood sacrifice, and this is called the botu. As we studied before, it is a tremendously complex religion. Some of the standings come from an ancient Veda the most ancient sacred literature of the Hindus. One quality of Hinduism is its supposed tolerance of other religious faiths and beliefs. It is true that Hinduism allows a Hindu to worship in a church building, a mosque, which is a place of worship, or worship for the Muslims, those of the Islamic faith, or a gurudwara, a place of worship for the Sikh, just as freely as in a Hindu temple. It is really more of a league of religions, or a combination of religions. In its hospital mansion, there is room for all types of souls, from the highest to the lowest. And as one grows in virtue, love, and insight, one can pass from apartment to apartment and never feel that the atmosphere is stuffy or hot. For this reason, it is rather difficult to answer the question, what is Hinduism, in a way which will do justice to all its beliefs and practices. There was a king, Ashoka, who's a Buddhist by faith, who had complete religious tolerance. He's been quoting as having said, there should not be honor to one's own sect or condemnation to another sect. On the contrary, another sect should be honored on this and that occasion. By doing so, one promotes one's own sect and benefits another sect. King Ashoka also said that this openness and freedom of the Hindu religion appears to be in theory but not in practice. And this is the intolerant seen of the Hindus toward Muslims and Christians. They've had quite a few reports of disturbances among the churches. Preachers have been beaten, members have been harassed, buildings have been destroyed. One preacher was stabbed to death. They've had an account of a brother up in the northern section, north of Calcutta, where his fields were burned by the Muslims. But they didn't take account that the wind was going to shift and it burned their fields. And so as he fled, he and the brothers began to think and to pray, and they got money together to buy seed, and they went and planted their fields and also the fields of their enemies. And through this experience, many people were converted to Christianity. There was also an example that Ron told about a girl named Esther. And there was famine in the land. And they decided that they would make a blood sacrifice of this young girl. Her parents protested this, and so instead they began to cut off a digit of her fingers gradually. The family was able to escape, and this girl grew up very bitter because of her fingers and I think also her toes being mutilated. But as she began to learn about Jesus Christ, she went back to this village and taught them about Jesus Christ, where they could learn about love and forgiveness. And so these are very touching stories that we hear from our brothers and sisters in India, where they are helping to dispel this darkness by the life they live and their example to these people. For several reasons, the percentage of those who follow Hinduism is decreasing, even with a tremendous increase in the population of India. It is feared by older, more dedicated Hindus that Hinduism, as it has been known for centuries, will be lost. And that is because of the breakdown of the extended family. Used to, families lived in one house together, and the older patriarch would teach the children. But now they're moving out into their own homes, and so the younger families do not reside under the same roof and do not teach their children. Sounds kind of like America, doesn't it? The family is much less likely to live together or teach the children the beliefs, and so they end up with ignorance of their faith. They simply cling to the rituals, the superstitions, and the myths, even though they do not understand the why behind it. And this is understandable, as they have 300 to 300 million deities that they worship. Oftentimes they worship not only their gods, but the gods' wives and maybe even the gods' children. And this can be many animals as well. The reason Ron says that they don't eat meat is they believe that they might be eating their relatives. And so this is why they have quite a bit of tolerance to the cows in their land. Unfortunately, we have often been guilty of the same thing in the large church. Too often, we find those who are Christians by generation rather than regeneration. And this is what we are seeing among many of the Hindu people. Hinduism accepts thousands or millions of gods, or the many incarnations of their various main deities. Each deity seems to add to the flavor of Hinduism, or maybe it should be said adds flavor to Hinduism. The beliefs of Hinduism are deeply entwined with the mystical personalities of these so-called gods, which often take on many forms, each adding to the varied philosophies, theological disciplines, and beliefs. They have many beliefs and legends, and these are found in paintings, in caves, in carvings, in the ancient caves, the temples, and burial grounds. Hundreds of years of Buddhism and Hinduism have been preserved and can be seen even today in such places as Ellora and the Ajanta caves near Aurangabad, and in temples throughout India, which date back over 1,000 years. However, in spite of their many gods and goddesses, the Hindu acknowledges and believes there is a supreme God who is spirit. Of the basic beliefs of Hinduism, there are two fundamental tenets which seem to engulf the Hindu and his daily life and plans for his next life. There are one, the law of karma, which is the law of cause and effect, not just fate or luck or chance, but the idea that what you are today is determined by your past life. And second, the law of dharma, which is righteous duties which have to be performed with excellence and moral purity as the goal. This is such a vital belief to the Hindu that is believed that dharma sustains the world and is that which holds the world together. Actually, there are at least 23 different definitions found of the word dharma, and we're hearing it today on a TV program by that name. As with all the world religions, Buddhism, Confucianism, Jainism, Islam, Judaism, the followers of Hinduism believe they are saved by their good works. These good works include prayer, alms, giving to their God, worship, and doing better. However, Hinduism teaches that their followers have many chances. Through the belief of reincarnation or transmutation of the soul, the ideas of karma and dharma, a Hindu might come back thousands and thousands of times. A follower of Hinduism believes that he might come back as an insect if he has lived a wicked life, or as a cow if he has lived a model life. However, it is only when he has finally reached perfection through thousands and thousands of reincarnations is his soul sent on to their idea of heaven or nirvana. However, this is in a heaven where there is no personal redemption. The souls of those who finally attain nirvana are simply blended with the souls of others into one. Now, into the darkness of Hinduism, we must talk about caste. There are several different kinds of caste in the Hindu system. These classes or castes have developed into many subcastes, of which there are approximately 3,000 today. This system has been responsible for the vast division of the nation of India and other Hindu countries. The highest of the caste system is the Brahmins, who are the teachers and priests, those who exercise spiritual authority or power. Next come the Kshatriyas, who are the warriors and rulers, those who exercise secular power. Next come the Vaishyas, the people who are the merchants, the tradespeople, the artisans, and those who represent the economic aspect of society. And then comes the Sudras, who are somewhat like slaves or servants, the common laborers. However, they do have certain rights, unlike the last group. And then we've all heard of the untouchables, or the outcasts as they have become known. This group was made up of those who in some way violated certain caste rules. This continues to pass on to their offspring. An example of this is the Nayadis. They don't eat beef, as I said before, because they think they may be eating a dead relatives. They cannot go down in their caste. If they marry out of their caste, their children will be of that caste. And so this is where another group who became outcasts were those who did not follow the change which began to take place in the eating habits of the Brahmins and the Vaishyas in the eating of meat. Then came the idea of those who continued to eat meat became untouchables or outcasts. This practice came through the influence of the Buddhists and the Jains. The idea of this certain group being considered outcast or untouchables is not upheld or sanctioned in Hinduism. However, the practice of such gives the upper echelon of Hindu society, those people who can carry out the menial task which they are violently opposed to doing, is latrine cleaners, cemetery keepers, scavengers, street sweepers, and etc. It is felt that the idea of untouchability is the responsibility of the Hindu society, not the Hindu religion, and that society itself is responsible for the inhumane treatment mediated to these people. The idea of untouchability is so ingrained in the lives of the upper caste of Hindu peoples that a Brahmin cannot have anyone but another Brahmin cook for him or cut his hair. Should the shadow of an outcast Hindu fall on the food of a Brahmin, the food is considered contaminated and cannot be eaten by the Brahmin. And there are many prohibitions about eating and about marrying outside your own caste. And if they marry a lower caste, then their children will be of that lower caste. Concerning one's becoming polluted in one way or another, there were many practices involving one's purity and rituals of purification. These seem to be similar in theory to the practices in the Old Testament of purification. A Brahmin is allowed 3 wives, a Kshatriya is allowed 2, and a Vaishya or Sudra is allowed 1. It is believed by some that the men of the upper 3 castes may marry from the Sudra caste, and that was the slave or servant category. It's for in consequence of such a marriage, the degradation of the family certainly ensues, and after death, the loss of heaven. So they usually marry within their own caste. An example of the caste system is found in the strict discipline of the Kshatriya. This caste is divided into 3 basic groups: those which are sun-born, those which are fire-born, and the moon-born. Within these basic castes, there are clans. For example, in the fire-born caste, there are 18 different clans. The discipline of these castes is so strict that intermarriage is forbidden, even with another clan of the same caste. However, it has been discovered that marriages can take place under certain situations. However, the male can only marry one of a higher clan. Should he marry a girl from a lower clan, she must first become a member of his family through patrilineal something, or succession or descendancy. And that is made up to the father side of the family. In discussing the darkness of Hinduism in the life of the Indian woman, it must be considered and understood that Hinduism is so tightly entwined in the very life of India that it is often impossible to separate the two. And we have talked about the botra is where they put the red dot on their forehead to symbolize the blood sacrifice. The status of the women in Hindu society was one which was envied by others. The women were given opportunity to pursue an education, and often among the princely families, the princess was given the opportunity to choose her own groom. However, polygamy was accepted in some Hindu societies, mostly among the princes, who arranged several marriages with the daughters of the rulers of nearby princely states. Keep in mind, though, that some of these princely estates were only the size of a football field. This was done mainly for political reasons. In the same manner, polyandry, or one woman having several husbands, was also practiced. Girls were generally not married until they were in their teens or even later. However, because of invaders abducting the young girls, they began to have child brides. And that became quite commonplace, hoping that by being married, that the virginity, her lack of virginity, would detract from her beauty as a virgin. During this time, the practice of shaving the heads of the widows was begun, and this was also to make them less attractive to the invaders. And in the process, they also lost independence, lost opportunity for the knowledge of acquiring knowledge and learning. They still have child brides and an arranged marriage. In fact, that is the norm in India, and what is acceptable is to have an arranged marriage. This is usually made by an elder member of the family. The two older male members will meet to begin discussion of a possible arrangement. Only after much discussion and approval by other family elders will the two be allowed to view the other, without the knowledge of the other at this time. After an approval of each by what they saw, they were then allowed to meet face to face, but only while accompanied by another member of their family. If this is done while the children are small, then the child has no voice in this marriage. Should the boy die before the marriage, the young girl is considered a widow, never being allowed to marry. In the event of the two being older and of marriageable age, then the date of the engagement is set. This is similar to the betrothal in Bible times, and it is binding. Or at least there is little chance the girl would ever be able to marry. During this time, the dowry is set. In today's society, the bride's family pays the dowry to the family of the groom. In past generations, the groom's family paid the dowry to the bride's family. However, due to the groom and his family often making the bride to feel that she had been bought and that she was now their property, the time came, and still is, that the bride pays the dowry, supposedly relieving her of the status of being owned. This did not work out as planned. In Karen's opinion, the dowry is the main reason for much of India's poverty. Should a father be blessed with several daughters, the likelihood of his ever getting out of debt is nil. Due to the cultural expectations, the dowry and the marriage fee are both prerequisite to an acceptable marriage and very expensive. Often at the time of marriage, the groom's family will demand more dowry to be paid on the spot or a promise of such in the near future. If denied, the marriage might be called off and the already paid dowry lost. Or should the additional dowry not be paid in the future, there is often an accident where the bride is burned to death. And I'm sure you've read in the paper where they have many accidental kitchen fires. And this is when the bride is burned to death. We've heard about mother-in-laws in our country, but it's nothing like in India. A newly married boy brings his new bride to live with him in the home of his family, and she often becomes a slave in the house. It is though it is an acceptable tradition for the mother-in-law to deal misery to her daughter-in-law. Even though India, with exception the state of Kerala, is considered to be a patriarchal society, the mother wields much control over the family. Often it seems as though India is a patriarchal society in name only. It is though with the bringing of a young bride to the home that the mother-in-law now has someone that she can rule and control. Karen addresses this problem in her ladies' Bible classes. She talks to them and says, "Do you remember how you felt when you were a daughter-in-law? Were you frightened when you went into your your husband's home?" And they say yes. Then she asked them how many of them would like their daughter to be treated in the same way that they were treated. And in this way, she gets them to stop and think. How do you want your daughter to be treated in your son-in-law's homes? And it's like they've never even thought about it before. And that doesn't mean that it's always a bad situation, but often it is. She is doing to her daughter-in-law what she would not want done to her daughter. But now, possibly for the first time in her life, she has power over someone else. The birth of a girl continues to be viewed as a financial disaster in India. It's a matter of simple accounting. If you have girls, they're going to cost you money. But if you have boys, then they're going to bring the dowry into the family. And if you have one of these accidental kitchen fires where the girl is burned, then you can marry again and then bring more money into the family. And so girls are liabilities. Many times, due to their inability to pay for the dowry, many girl babies are killed. And as they have brought sonograms into the country and can determine the birth of the child, then we have a lot of infanticide in India. In fact, they estimate 85% of the little girls are aborted. And one mother even divulged that she had killed 6 of her daughters before she finally had a male child. And she said it's the fault of the government. After all, you government people want to limit our families. We are doing just that. We do not want females, and we do not want to stop pregnancies until we get a male. That is the explanation. Female children really are a burden to their parents in such a culture as India. And it appears that it is not just in the case of the poor. This also happens in the upper echelons or the higher status of society. How many of you saw Around the World in 80 Days? Did you remember seeing that? How many of you have seen Far Pavilions? It also shows culture habits of the Indians. We've heard about suiting, and this is where the bride is burned alongside her husband in that country. Around the World in 80 Days, you remember that Phineas Fogg comes to the rescue of this lovely damsel in distress. She is being drugged before she is burned beside her dead husband, and he rescues her. But this is still, even though it's frowned upon, is still practiced in India today. And it goes back to the Vedic times in which they made self-sacrifice. A widow did not have much chance in India. And so they are very poor. They cannot support themselves. And so the woman is heavily drugged before she is burned. And back in the 1600s to 1947, Lord William Bentinck was Governor General of India and brought about many reforms to help the women in their families. They consider this a means of protecting widows because they cannot support themselves, because they are burdened to their family, and also to protect them from invaders to their country and to preserve their reputation. Few widows are allowed to remarry. They are not allowed into the temple to worship. They are poor and a burden on their family. And few have any kind of income or support. Many things comprise the darkness of Hinduism. And one of these problems is overpopulation. The birth rate has declined in recent years, but the life expectancy has arisen. In 1950, the life expectancy was 30, and it has almost doubled now due to better health. They do not believe in contraception or family planning, and it's estimated that India will surpass communist China as the most populous country on earth. As it is now, India's nearly 1 billion people make it the second most populous nation with the 7th largest land area. Try to imagine there being 4 times as many people east of the Mississippi as there are now in a land that size. 4 times as many people. Hinduism has kept its adherents in darkness for centuries, yet we have the promise of salvation through Christ Jesus. We must work to dispel the ignorance of the people. And the job that Karen and Ron face is not to Americanize the people, but to Christianize these people. In Acts 26:18, it says, to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan unto God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and inheritance among them which are sanctified by faith, that is, in me. And only through God's word is that possible. In the prophecy of Jesus Christ, it says, and those in darkness shall see a great light. Only the teaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ can dispel this darkness. And we can become a part of this ministry in helping dispel this darkness. And we have some brochures to pass out. And I hope each of you will get one of those before you leave the room that tell about the work in India. They have preacher training schools where they teach them, they train them, and then they trust them to go out into the villages to teach. And it's amazing what a bicycle and a lantern will do to help promote the gospel in India. Because a man not only teaches in his village, but he rides out or walks out to the other villages around him and teaches. These are some of the most religious people in the world, according to Ron and Karen. They are very receptive to the teaching of the gospel. He said when you have a baptism, they want a gospel sermon preached. When you have a wedding, they want a gospel sermon preached. When you have a funeral, they want the gospel preached. They are eager to tell the good news of Jesus Christ to their family and friends. We need to have a heart for the harvest. God tells us to pray for laborers to go forth into the fields and to teach these. We too should be light bearers to dispel the darkness in America, to help dispel the darkness of other countries in taking the light or sending the light to other countries. These people are receptive and more receptive than any place else in the country, in the world today, Ron believes, because of this religious beliefs that they have of trying to do better and be a better person and to live a good life. John 4:35 says, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. John 1:5 says, the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Paul received a vision where he said, come over into Macedonia and help us. And many people in India are giving this same cry, come over and teach us. Come to our village and tell us the news of Jesus Christ. And so we can help send this light. Then the truth gives light. Ron told me the story about a woman who had gone to the funeral of her mother. And on the way back to her village, she stopped at a gospel meeting and heard about Jesus Christ. And she grieved as she became a Christian that her mother never had the chance to learn about Jesus Christ. We need to send the light, to take the light to a world in darkness. Thank you for your attention. I would like for you to all to get a brochure now